Ahi Mārie, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, piki mai, kaki mai. Kia ora everyone, happy Matariki. What are we saying, Tan? Thank you. Thank you.
Anawatia Matariki.
Thank you, everyone. Now, could we start with a karakia by Councillor Sholem?
Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa po Ngamo te moana. Hei, hurahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai. Tātou I e tātou katoa. Huie, tai ki e. May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together.
Kia ora tātou. Can I acknowledge a very warm welcome to our visitors today. Great to see you in the chamber. Lovely to have you with us. And also a very warm welcome to our tuia. Sinead, lovely to have you here. We have apologies from Councillor Travis and Councillor O'Keefe, and any leave of absence. Councillor Kerr? Councillor Dixon?
Thank you, Worship. The 13th to the 15th of July inclusive, please.
Thank you. Happy to move that from the chair. Seconded Councillor Corbyn.
I've got
sorry.
it.
Too quick.
Worship, leave of absence next Monday and Tuesday. I'm not sure what the dates are. I think the 27th and 28th.
Awesome. Thank you. Councillor Barber.
The 27th and 28th of July, please.
Thank you. Councillor Barber. No further leave of absence. I'll put those, that's moved by the Mayor, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Can I just welcome Councillor Harvey, who is coming to our meeting today via Zoom. Good to see you, Damon. Can I just remind councillors of conflicts of interest in the normal way as we come to any. Now we have item 4, and it is my great pleasure to welcome Sinead Petty, and Angel might still be coming, but our tuia for 2022. And Sinead, if you'd like to come up to the microphone up here. This is an amazing program, and this year, when we went out to seek interest of application, we had 2 outstanding wahine who came forward and said they wished to be part of this national program. And I acknowledge Lawrence because, you know, this program started in 2008, and to see now the success of the tuia who have been through this program and where they've got to today, and we follow their journey. These are wonderful Māori leaders for the future. So it is my very great pleasure. Don't be nervous, Sinead. I know it looks quite formal here, but we're a very relaxed and casual bunch, and we're very, very excited to have you part of this program. The wānangas, the connections across Aotearoa are significant. The people that you'll meet who will influence your life and your life's journey will be really amazing. So this is such an exciting opportunity for us all. COVID has held us up. We are running a bit late with the program, but we're rocking and rolling now, aren't we? So welcome. Lovely to have you with us today.
Tēnā koutou. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mayor, for bringing me up here today. and allowing me to share a little bit about myself. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Sinead Perry tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei ngō Ngāti Porou me Ngāpuhi, he kaitohutohu au ki Te Puni Kōkiri. So my name is Sinead Perry and I am a regional advisor at Te Puni Kōkiri. I am on a 6-month secondment from the Ministry of Social Development, where I came as an employment case manager. So my main focus, or my main passion, is that I love working with rangatahi, getting them to a place where they feel their best. Whatever that may look like, I'm not sure what that is, but if I can get them from A to B to C, then that's an achievement in my eyes. This opportunity to be on the Tuia program is really beneficial in terms of a leadership aspect for myself. I get to be mentored by the Mayor, and I get to meet various rangatahi across the country that have very like-minded views, and also bring to the table different challenges and different points that I may not have thought of. And I get to do it alongside a buddy, Angel, and so I've known her since we were young. So it's an awesome opportunity for both of us to be on it together, learn together, and we both have different views as well. So she comes from a sporting background, and it's we kind of marry the two, you could say. But no, thank you for having me here today, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. So there may be a couple of questions from anybody, so if you just want to hold fire. And I know that Angel, who works with Sport Hawke's Bay, is placed at the moment in a primary school in Napier, and was wondering if she could get here through her work time. So she'll come and introduce herself at another time. But anyone have any questions for Sinead? Councillor Kerr.
Morena Sinead. Given the program appears to have started later in the year, will you get your full 5 wānanga? Have you attended any? And have there been some learnings from any?
Unfortunately, I was sick the first one. I caught one of those really nice bugs that were floating around. So Angel had gone to the first one, but I do believe there's about 3 or 4 throughout the year. Yeah. Thank you.
If I could, Sinead, just kia ora and welcome to the Chamber. Congratulations on being part of the Tuia program this year. I just want to make a couple of other acknowledgements. You came into MSD at a time, and it feels at the time matariki to acknowledge the passing last year of Annie Aranui. She was incredibly proud of you. She had this real vision of and passion for, like you share, advancing rangatahi and mokopuna, and in Annie's legacy, we established in partnership across the councils and with our marae and with community organisations and private sector the Annie Aranui Scholarship, and want to acknowledge also that you were the initial recipient of the Annie Aranui Scholarship, and she would be incredibly, I know, proud of you and the path that you were on. And also just to acknowledge that in your work at Te Puni Kōkiri, the other thing that is incredibly important for our community at the moment is it is Pāharakikis time, and the amazing stuff that is happening out there with the Pāharakiki Trades United, and the kaupapa about building Flaxmere from the inside out and growing opportunities for our rangatahi and our apprentices and growing our Māori enterprise. And I just want to acknowledge and say thanks for the awesome work that you're doing in your day job at Te Puni Kōkiri in terms of working with our community to help us realise that aspiration. So, congratulations on being part of the Tuia program. And I just think this awesome path that you're on and embracing all of these opportunities around your development is just beautiful to see.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Nigel. And we also, our first conversation when we did our mentoring the other day with Angel and Sinead was, did anybody think they could fit standing for council in amongst their day jobs? So, there's the girls have some really big aspirations. They are very much looking in leadership roles across everything that we do in Hiritonga. Councillor Barber?
Yeah, kia ora, Sinead, tēnā koe tō, tō tū whakamoio mai kia mata ko ai koe, me tō whakawhiwhinga mai tēnei tūranga, hei tuia, hei te tāo tō mata nei kahika toi hau, Sandra. Just building on what Sandra was talking about in terms of your leadership or aspirations going forward, what are your kind of whakaaro or dreams in terms of leadership or anything really, maybe going forward? Kia ora.
What about the chair, Ngāti Kahanunu?
Yeah.
For myself, currently I'm wanting to complete my degree. So I had started with the Waikato University studying law and Māori development. So one thing that I do want to tick off the list is actually completing my degree. So I have re-signed up with Victoria University for B semester. So one step further to that. And a couple of other sort of aspirations I see for myself in the future is that I am heading, well, I really want to head towards either the regional commissioner role or further along into national office within the public sector. I do enjoy the public sector, and I do believe that we're in a position of moving forward and changing the way that we serve our whānau out there. So later on, that's where I hope to be.
Oh, well done. Yeah. Councillor Sholem?
Thank you, Worship, and welcome back to Chamber. I want to acknowledge the work that you put into the Youth Council last year as well. It was a huge contribution, so thank you. And I just want to put in there, when you're thinking big about your visions for the future, don't forget, you know, you've done some great work on the Youth Council, just saying. I'd like to reinforce what Mayor Sandra has implied. You know, you could think about this table as well. Thank you.
Kia ora, Wendy. Well, I'm happy to move my report. I have a seconder, thank you. Councillor Redstone. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you for coming in, Sinead, and we look forward to you both being in to see us again shortly.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. All the very best. Councillors, now we move on to item 6, and welcome to Dean Ferguson, who's been the project manager. Just some opening comments. The AMP Society came to council earlier in the year to ask us to consider a purchase for the Te Moana Showgrounds. This opportunity and opportunity of investment now has been thoroughly worked through with the society, with our team, to consider all options and how the working of the future of Te Moana Showgrounds could be for all parties. And when I say all parties, I mean events people, I mean community, and everybody who loves this very treasured place. And this hasn't been easy, because this beautiful place has been in the hands of, looked after by the Showgrounds AMP Society for a very, very long time. And so there has been a lot of work undertaken, and I just want to acknowledge that work that has gone on in bringing parties together. I'm proud that I was able to attend with some other councillors the process that we went through to engage the community on whether they considered this being a wise investment of ratepayers' money. And as we've been through that process of engagement, 90% of the community who gave their feedback were in support of council purchasing the Showgrounds. Everywhere I go, the community talks to me about this very special place. Everyone has their stories about it, and it is very dear to all of us who are raised in Hastings. So, Dean, if you'd like to add anything to your report.
Just if I could, through you, Your Worship, add to that, just drawing out some of the key elements. Dean will be able to answer any of the technical questions, but just to build on Her Worship's comments, the key elements of this obviously is a sale price of $7.5 million. It's consistent with the valuation. The agreements that we've reached with the ANP Society allows them to retain 2.7 hectares of land, which they will look to subdivide. That the key elements of the sale and purchase agreement is that clearly, importantly, the showgrounds will continue to be known as Tōmoana. It gives the ANP Society in perpetuity the rights to use the grounds for 10 days a year for things that are important to both the society and the community. The ANP show that we will establish a trust to oversee the ongoing management of the showgrounds, and obviously a settlement date of the 31st of March next year, which will trigger, that I know is also really important to the community, that this is a really important green space for the community, and there will be a commitment from council and a requirement that in the 12 months following that the council, should you decide, and the ANP Society ratify this on Monday, a process to engage our community, with the end outcome being the vesting of this green space for the community into reserve status. So those are just the comments that I wanted to make, Your Worship, in addition to your comments, and I think can take the report as read and able to, between myself, Dean, and just also acknowledge Lawrence in the chamber today, who's also assisted in this work over the last 6 months.
Thank you, Nigel. Over to you, Dean.
Through you, Your Worship. Just in regards to the recommendations that are on the original report, there have been changes to the recommendations, which will be put up on the running sheet subsequent to the meeting. So, but I'll take the report as read and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So perhaps if we could have those recommendations up there, and maybe you could just work through and explain to councillors what those changes have been from the original agenda report. Okay. Before I take any questions.
Certainly, through you, Your Worship. The key changes, the recommendations are the delegations to the CE in order to sign the obviously the final sale and purchase and the licence agreement on behalf of the council.
So just to remind everybody that the society will have their meeting on Monday night, and they will then have their vote and decide if they indeed want to accept the terms and sign the contract. In addition, can I just point out that while where the offer is $7.5 million, as it says in recommendation B, there would also be an additional $1 million that would be required from our ratepayers per annum for operational costs, for principal and interest, and also for repairs and maintenance of about $600,000 or $700,000 each year. So that would be in addition to the $7.5 million. So just for everybody to be well aware, and if we look at some of those comments received from our community and the feedback, we need to give that due consideration. Starting with Councillor Sears, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, and acknowledging the huge amount of response we had from our community around the showgrounds and how important it obviously is to our community that the asset stays here for the use of all our community. So my question is, we heard a lot of aspirations and dreams for what might happen out there. We didn't just hear yes by it, we heard a lot about what could happen out there. Just to be sure that the process would go into around consultation around the general reserve and what might happen there, that the community is aware that that will be a time where all the things that could happen will be discussed and considered. That we talk about green space, but we know there are all sorts of ideas out there, and that the community will have plenty of time to feed those back in and for those to be discussed.
So that's the next stage of the consultation, so I'll ask the Chief to
Yeah,
answer that
thank you,
question.
Councillor Sears. Yes, the really important bits here for our community. One that this really special piece of land will be vested in reserves, and we're required to do that within 12 months of being the owners of the showgrounds. And of course, the process that we will go through with our community, having regard for, obviously what it's zoned as, the things that we've learned, lots of heritage trees, is an engagement process with our community, so that it's our community that has a say in how those showgrounds are, basically used for generations to come, and how they're vested in reserve status. And that's what we will be sort of doing in the 12 months from the point that should we be the owners of the showgrounds. But a very, as you know, with the reserve management plans process that we go through, a process of highly engaging our community in that.
Thank you. Thank you. So if we just start with questions, councillors, and then we move into debate. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. There's a strong rumour circulating out there that the AMP
You
Society,
have a question, Councillor
yes,
Dixon?
I have, can put residential properties on their grounds now if they want to. My question to the officers is, would you please explain what they can currently do and currently not do?
I'll ask Mr. Shaughnessy to come forward to explain the district plan. Oh, could you come up here to the mic, please?
Through you, Madam Chair. As you know, the showgrounds is presently plains zoning. So in terms of going ahead with a residential proposal, council's working on what they call their future development strategy and the regional spatial plan. So for it to actually change, some would either have to make a plan change, or the council through its FDS or its regional plan strategic plan, it would need to look at rezoning of this area. And then the other area the option that has been suggested by some people is that the COVID provisions, special COVID provisions for rezoning may apply. I've been through that quite carefully with Rowan Wallace, and we're both of the opinion that it's unlikely that would get through that process. That's not to say that someone can't apply for that, but the COVID process doesn't appear to align very well with the form and the nature of the land. So they can still apply, but I guess council gets the opportunity to have input on that. And our view would be we wouldn't be supporting it because it's outside HPUDs, and we have to do our FDS and spatial plan for the future development of the city.
And if I could just add further through you, Your Worship, to Mr O'Shaughnessy's comments in relation to the COVID process, it's not just the council. Should an application be made to the Minister to use the COVID processes, it requires engagement with both the council and with the iwi. And I think what we also know, in addition to the strong support from our community, is we have on record from Waipatu on behalf of Ngāti Hori and Ngāti Hāwea, a strong endorsement for the council to be the, supporting the council owning this space, and for it to continuing to be, it is also incredibly culturally important, and so the iwi aspect is also a very strong part should there be any application, which there hasn't been. And the COVID legislation also has a sunset clause, and it has, I think from memory, Mr O'Shaughnessy, 9 months left before there is no longer any COVID fast track provisions for housing.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I thought it was important to be out there.
I'll just take any further questions on planning at the moment. Anyone's got any further questions on planning? Councillor Harvey?
Thank you. Do I need to stand?
No?
Okay.
We'll just go to wide. Sorry.
Thank you. Just John, So I'm getting an echo.
I know the echo.
Does that also relate to their 2.1 hectares?
The plain zoning applies across all of the site. So that includes that small triangular part that is proposed to be subdivided off.
But would we support an application for that?
The present policy position is no, because of it's plain zoned. And secondly, as I said before, we haven't completed the FDS or the regional spatial plan.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Harvey, you have any further questions on planning?
No.
Thank you. Right, we'll just go broader questions now. Councillor Dixon, are you comfortable with that? Thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Worship. I too would like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this, and just a couple of questions from me. I note in 4.4 that there is some mention of, as part of the negotiations with the AMP Society, free office accommodation for up to 5 staff members. Can you advise if there's a limitation of time on that?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Yes, for the first 5 years from settlement.
Excellent, thank you, that sounds reasonable. And also, just expanding on the question asked earlier by Councillor Sears around the next steps and the aspirations from our community for this amazing asset. I know that quite a bit of that ideas have come through the consultation process over just whether or not we should buy, and I'm just interested to understand how that information has been captured and how it may be fed into the next stage, bearing in mind that not everyone in our community will necessarily participate in the next round of consultation, so I don't want those ideas lost.
I'll deal with that, Dane. I think we've captured, obviously, both through the consultation sort of process, but also through, as the council will be aware, we had people come in and submit through the annual plan process some ideas around biodiversity centres. So we will capture all of that information that will form some of the initial base information that we have as we design the community engagement process in terms of going through that process around the reserve management plan.
It's wonderful to hear that will inform that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Councillor Barber.
Yeah, kia ora. My question is, the offer is 7.5, market value 7.85. Why have we gone that much under the market valuation?
Yeah. So the market, through you, Your Worship, the market valuation that was completed, 7.8 in terms of the valuation the council commissioned. We had the valuation provided that had been completed by the AMP Society that was 8 million. That was for the entire 42 hectare parcel. In terms of the negotiations and the way that we've netted off and allowing the 2.7 hectares that will be retained by the AMP Society, and obviously they will go through a process of making application for subdivision, noting that it is plain zone land, but it was netting that 2.7 hectares off.
Just one more. And just in terms of mana whenua, local hapu, have they asked? I mean, I see they're on the trust, but have they asked for anything more than that going forward? You know, in terms of the relationship with Ngāti Hāwea.
Not at this stage. Through you, Your Worship, we've had formal position of through Waipatu Marae on behalf of Ngāti Hāwea, Ngāti Hori, that their position, which is they're welcoming of the commitment for the Tomoana name to remain, to have one of the 5 trustee positions on the trust that would be established to oversee this, and very supportive of the showgrounds being, but beyond that. But I'd imagine, critical that we're going to obviously engage with, mana whenua through the process of determining the future and how that reserve is vested, and that will be an ongoing relationship and kōrero.
Kia ora. Councillor Nixon. Councillor Lawson.
Oh, thank you. I was about to get up. Kia ora. Look, just looking at the advantages and disadvantages, I note that one of the advantages is an opportunity for the site to act as a stormwater detention and flood mitigation area for Mayfair, balanced with the limitations on full use due to adhering to the conditions of the sale and purchase agreement, and also the fact that it is going to be vested into a reserve. I just want to know how that might look, how that might work. So a little bit more understanding about those two that seem to be opposing, advantages or disadvantages.
Dean?
Yeah, through you, Worship. So as part of our sort of planning for, the wider infrastructure needs around Hastings, this area has been identified as a key strategic site for stormwater detention and alleviate the flood risk around areas in Mayfair such as Caroline Road, Frederick Street and such. So it's in the very early stages. There's been a bit of planning done, but nothing has gone further than that. But the area has been sort of identified, just the area on the corner of Kenilworth and Mayfair as a potential stormwater detention area.
Sue, did you want to add anything?
Through you, the area, I think probably just two parts, is the potential detention area is already a low-lying corner of the showgrounds, and for 99% of the times, if that scheme went ahead, would be dry. So it would be similar to other low-lying areas where you just make sure it's low enough to store and hold water when there's very big rainfall. The other part of that wider scheme would be just tidying up the connections and looking at the nutrient removal through the prior to it making into the natural watercourse. So there's an opportunity to clean up some of the urban stormwater flow before it makes it into the natural stream and further out to the Karamu.
Could I have a follow-up question? I just probably want reassurance that the sale and purchase agreement and the limitations around that, there is nothing that would potentially, reduce the ability to do that should we want to.
Ben, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, through you, Worship. No, we don't see any limitations to that at all. Again, the modelling has been done around significant events, and we sort of see that, making assumptions here that, for the society using the whole site and potentially sort of whole site events such as Horse of the Year or the AMP Showgrounds, they will be for short periods of time during that course anyway. So we don't see it being a significant impact on the sale and purchase agreement or any potential use.
Okay, and also vesting it as a reserve, that's not a potential issue? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nixon?
I was going to make a comment, so I can wait until the questions are
just questions,
finished.
thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Sholem?
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, another question that has come to me during discussion. While I feel really comfortable that we've consulted with our community on the cost to purchase the showgrounds, and we've had a strong message from them, one of the things that I am conscious of is the ongoing costs associated with, securing such a wonderful asset. I'm interested to understand, as part of the process from here, what can be done to potentially look at offsetting some of those costs and how we can fully explore those.
So I think, through you, Your Worship, one of the, clearly that the starting point for this asset is a purchase price. Going forward, there's going to need to be a range of investment. Some of that will be informed out of the community engagement process around what the long-term reserve management plan is. It's like we do in a number of assets that are important to our community. I think one of the key elements of this around the structure of the management of this asset being through a trust is if we use comparable models like the regional sports park and a trust, is the ability to attract investment and other forms of investment where it's not all being borne by the ratepayer. So if we use the regional sports park as an example, things that would normally be wholly the business of councils to own and fund on behalf and manage on behalf of communities, where we've ended up with $100 million worth of assets for our community at the regional sports park, where circa 30% of the cost has been borne by the ratepayers and the others come through the ability to generate revenue, whether it's through you know, philanthropic or sporting, you know, entities through to corporate sort of sponsorship, and that's what part of the go forward work of the trust will be.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sears.
Kia ora, Your Worship. I suppose following on from Councillor Lawson, I think I'd also like a little bit more confidence that not just the stormwater, but the agreement with AMP in perpetuity to run the AMP show on the whole site, requiring all this parking, etc. I suppose I'm interested, you know, our community, the ratepayer will be purchasing this, they'll own this asset. And if through this engagement we find that their aspirations have some different directions for their own asset, could there be a compromise around this requirement for the AMP to have this 10 days and the show in perpetuity? Could there be some conflicts that could compromise the community's capacity actually to realise their own aspirations?
Through you, Your Worship, a couple of comments. I suppose, you know, the starting point would be, you know, the current owners of the site are the AMP Society, and any negotiation around a sale and purchase agreement, we've had to accommodate, you know, a set of conditions, one of which is what's really important to the AMP Society as the current owners, which they have been doing for 100+ years in terms of ownership. What's important to the community, we know the AMP show. Now the questions into the future around, well, will we continue to have an AMP show in the form that it's been in for decades? Those are all unknowns, but I think the really important thing around the way that we're trying to do this as a community asset, recognising the history of the AMP Society, is a trust that has the council, the AMP Society, Waipatu Marae, a couple of independent trustees, and are working together in the benefits of our whole community. And so that would be my sense of, you know, it's been a really important for the AMP, given their ownership and what the AMP Society stands for, that they've sought to get as part of the condition of the sale, the ability to use in perpetuity 10 days a year for the purpose of the AMP Society, that lines up with the crest behind us, Town and Country in unison, and the role that the AMP show, the field days, that the Wine Awards play in terms of their purpose for existence as an AMP Society.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hopefully a relatively simple question. Is there a time, I'm not sure who to direct this to, is there a time frame, and if so, what is the time frame for the creation of this management entity, be it, we've used the words trust and trustees, when is that likely to be, I guess, underway?
Well, fairly immediately. Should the council resolve today to purchase the showgrounds, should the AMP Society, when they meet on Monday, ratify that sale and purchase agreement, clearly there's a lot of work to do in the 9 months leading up to, you know, a settlement date of the 31st of March next year, and the council's becoming the owner next year. So we will be doing all of that work, including the establishment of the trust arrangements in that period of time.
Your Worship, may I just... thank you for that. That was really reassuring, because I wasn't sure if this entity was going to be running the space from day one or was going to be picked up after the reserve management plan. So that's reassuring. Are you ready to take comments, Your Worship?
I've got one further question from Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just, it's a very small question. The 10 days free use, are they set days or are they whenever they like?
They, I think the way that we've structured the licence agreement through you, Your Worship, is it's 10 days a year. You know, for a lot of these events like the show, you know, it happens at the same time every year. But the requirement for the AMP Society to give significant notice, so, you know, we're going to be balancing, well, you can't come in at a month's notice to say, oh, we want to run this event when somebody else has made the booking. So So broadly, yeah, it's 10 days for largely some events that we know are repeat events, the show, field days, wine awards, and the requirement to give is it 3 months 3 months notice of those events.
I was just making sure that we were covered for our own events. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, do you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions. Just following on from that series of questions and having read through the license agreement, is there the potential that we would be competing with the AMP Society in specific events or realms of events? For argument's sake, if we were, what I'm a little bit worried about is that should the AMP Society only be looking at events that promote the primary sector, rather than if a concert promoter came to them? How do we sort of understand the realms of what they can host in comparison to what we can?
Through you, Your Worship, we haven't got down into that level of specificity. We have agreed that it's 10 days use of the grounds in perpetuity. It has been offer recognition that, you know, their purpose and their iconic events, the show, field days, but in theory, the AMP Society could choose to try and develop some events, and the agreement that we've made in terms of both the sale and purchase and the license agreement doesn't preclude them from doing that.
Is there the potential that we can amend it to? I'm just looking at it from what we see as the appeal of the showgrounds and the ability for us to market it as an outdoor festival, concert events facility, yet that we could be going up against one of the tenants of the showgrounds.
So through you, Your Worship, to answer the first question, could we change that? No, we've been through a process that's taken many months to agree to a conditional sale and purchase agreement and license agreement. At a practical level, when I think about some of the promoters and events, we're going to have to work this through as it arises. But I know from the engagement we've had with the promoters, often promoters aren't just looking for the hire of the grounds. They're looking to work with the local authority in terms of all of the regulatory matters that go with getting consents, liquor licenses, and so certainly some of the very positive feedback that we've also had from the wider community is the promotion community and the events community who are looking forward to being able to work with the council in quite a holistic way about, being the owners of the showground and all of the other things that we do to support events.
Okay, so just one other question, supplementary question to that, please. Will there be an agreed hireage rate card for both parties? So we're on a level playing field, and we're not necessarily getting played off by a promoter because they can get it via the AMP Society at a cheaper rate.
At this stage, we haven't got into that level of detail, but we haven't specified in the agreements how the AMP Society chooses to use their 10 days in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you. And then just my last question, Mayor Sandra, the 1.1 million annual overhead costs that will be incurred, what does that relate to ratepayers on an annual basis?
Thank you. Dean, do you want to respond to that question? Or Bruce?
Yeah, through Your Worship. Yeah, so it works out to around 1%.
Yep, so just in dollar terms for a ratepayer, please.
Well, there's no sort of exact number on that because all ratepayers pay a different amount of rates. But if you used an average residential property of $2,000 per property, 1% on that. So it will vary significantly across the properties based on how much rates they pay, and it is on the general rate as well.
Yeah, I just think it's important that we're seeing this happen in Christchurch at the moment with investment into a stadium, and they're saying it's ratepayers $35 per ratepayer. So we're just quite keen for our ratepayers to understand what they are potentially contributing on an annual basis. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's a valid point. Councillor Kerr?
I have a question, Your Worship.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. One of the things that I have been a little concerned about, knowing the asset quite well, is the imposition of health and safety regulations on whoever sits around the entity, be it a trust or whatever. I'm just interested in if there's any work that can be done between now and day one, assuming it all goes ahead, or what protections can be put in place. Because if we want the best people sitting at the table at the trust, that's something we may have to address. Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, noted, recognising that, yes, there's further work to do, but we have done a fair, an extensive amount of due diligence already in terms of knowing the assets, and certainly in terms of prioritisation, the critical assets as council becoming the PCBU from the 1st of April next year will need to be well prepared for.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Is everyone aware of what that PCBU means?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nixon, you have a question?
No, I was going to comment when the questions are finished.
Yeah, if you're opening to comments, that would be great. I'm really excited by this. I think this has been a great opportunity. One of the things I'm really proud of is...
Councillor Kerr, I have Councillor Nixon was ahead of you on my comments. So we'll come to you second.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon?
Yes, thanks. I'm sure Councillor Kerr and I were going to say the same thing, and there will be others to say it. I mean, it's a magnificent facility. There's no denying it. And it does bring some really major events to Hawke's Bay, Farmers Market, Horse of the Year, and AMP show, and some of the more recent things like concerts and so on. So there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to support it and should support it. The surveys we did revealed at least 90% support all of them, which is just overwhelming. We don't normally get that level of support for anything. And certainly I will support it. And I think Councillor Harvey raised a very good question when he talked about the debt, which will increase by $7.5 million, and costs, broadly speaking, on rates will be another 1%. And I just want to make sure that that is mentioned again, because just last week we agreed to a $2 million support for Pettigrew Green. So suddenly in 2 weeks we've added $9.5 million to our debt with corresponding increase in costs. Both worthy projects, no doubt, but yeah, we do need to be mindful of ratepayers have to pay, and for many things are getting very difficult. So having raised those issues, I don't think I need to say any more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I'm going to speak slightly differently. But in general, we agree. I'm really excited by this. I think the district plan has been very robustly challenged in the past by commercial entities trying to build on our fertile soil, and it has held us in good stead. And to see this piece of green space that's been loved by our community for decades, to see that protected forever is something that I'm going to be very, very proud of. and to understand that this is just the beginning of a process where the reserve management plan allows our community to tell us what they want to see there, and we can still recognise the heritage. A part of our city that requires more green space is actually that Mayfair area. So this, making it publicly available rather than fenced off and owned by somebody else, is another bonus. But quite simply, it benefits everybody. The society, and I know I've been a member of the society's financial challenges over many years. This helps set them up for the future very well. The benefit also extends to our significant, well, I guess all our tenants, or all the tenants of the site, including events as touched on by Councillor Nixon. But for our community at large, it becomes their space. And very significantly to me, it's come with very strong support from the hapu at Waipatu Marae. So yeah, ticks all the boxes, so excited. And I would be happy to move the recommendations as listed if you're ready to take them, or I can wait.
No, I'm happy to take them. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations? Councillor Redstone. Thank you. So next up is Councillor Sears.
Kia ora, Ms Sandra. I too am going to support the recommendation. It's not often that this type of asset becomes available for a community. There's definitely a concern for me around the community's aspirations and some of the limitations possibly on the site, but I'm taking confidence from the Chief's expectation or feeling that this trust will be approaching everything we do in a way that's going to benefit the community rather than perhaps provide, separate commercial opportunities in some sort of competitive way, as Councillor Harvey's suggested. So that part of the licensing agreement does concern me, but I certainly see that the benefits far, far outweigh those slight concerns. Thank you.
And I think that, that all those details will be sorted out once we know the direction of path of travel. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I fully support this decision, support the purchase of the showgrounds. It's going to be an asset for Hastings and for Hawke's Bay for perpetuity. And it's a decision that's supported by our ratepayers through the submission process. For me, it's only the start of a new beginning for the showgrounds. It's a magnificent green space on our urban boundary. And long may it stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Shodham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was incredibly grateful that we received such a clear direction from our community around purchasing this asset. One of the things that I continue to be concerned about is the ongoing costs that is associated with acquiring such a wonderful piece of land and protecting it. So I will support this because our community has said to do it. However, I am really conscious that they said to do it without a full understanding of the ongoing costs and implications to them. So I will definitely be looking forward to that next step of the process and looking at how we can make sure that we get the best return on this amazing asset for our community and really leverage that trust. Thank you for the work that's gone into it. I think this is the best possible deal we can get, and I think our community thinks that as well.
Thank you. Other speakers, please. Councillor Barber.
Yep, kia ora tātou. Support the recommendation to purchase the showgrounds. Part of that land is, all of it's significant to the hapu, but the Waikoko Gardens has a long whakapapa to Ngāti Hāwea, and the Heretaunga hapu, all of us. Yeah, so having that in our ownership for our community, I think is really important. And yeah, I support the other comments around green spaces at that part of Hastings, and the fact that it has been such a significant recreational area, location for events, key events in Hastings. So I think it's a win-win. I think it's a win for us, the community, and a win for the society. And yeah, let's move forward. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Obviously, I support this. I'm very excited about the possibility of a reserves management plan in that area and looking forward to the discussion with the community about that. But also when we talk about detention, stormwater detention, this is a huge opportunity to be putting in a proper wetlands in that area. So I'm very supportive of the whole kaupapa. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Redstone. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I totally support this. Generations of my family have been to the showgrounds over 100 years. It's part of our DNA. If you're in Hawke's Bay, the showgrounds, that's just part of us. So it's the right thing to do. So totally support it.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. There's no further comments. Councillor Barber, you've completed your korero. Thank you. And I also, Councillor Pelletti.
When you do first.
Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you, Your Worship. I fully support the recommendation for all the reasons that have been stated this morning. The showgrounds have got a long heritage and history, and we're at a point now where we are providing a future for the showgrounds for the community. So I really fully support this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Corbyn. Councillor Ollie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'm in full support of the recommendations. My comment is based on branding of Hastings. If we're going to purchase this beautiful asset, I feel like the events that are going to be held there, we need to strongly encourage that Hastings be the front line or the branding of these events. So when Horse of the Year comes along, it's Hastings Horse of the Year or the Hastings Farmers Market, because, there's a lot of amazing events here, but we kind of, fall behind or fall into the shadow of our constituents across the river, Napier. So we need to really, market our beautiful city of Hastings.
Well said, Councillor Ollie, and great that we've got Sophie Blake from Horse of the Year with us in the chamber this morning. But you are absolutely right. It is. Hastings is known for our beautiful, beautiful parks and reserves. Frimley, Cornwall, Arkina, Windsor. That is who we are in Hastings. We have some beautiful parks and reserves, and this could certainly be another one of those beautiful places for the community. In fact, when I was down there one Friday afternoon about 3 o'clock making a video to ask the community to have their say whether or not we should purchase it, so many people came up to me from the local community who were just walking around the grounds and saying, you have to make this happen. This is a special and dear place for us. We come here every day, and that was the wider community who live and surround the Tōmona Showgrounds. So as a final say, I absolutely support this. Grateful actually to have had the opportunity when the AMP Showgrounds came to us a couple of years ago, first talked about our partnership and what our partnership could look like. And at that time, the timing wasn't right in terms of purchase, but the timing is right now, and from what we've heard from the society. And this is a massive opportunity for future generations, not just for us who sit at the table today, but all of the future generations that will call Hastings their home, and the opportunity for all the wider community to be able to have this special place protected for the future. So it is, has been a big journey and an exciting journey, and I look forward to the society and their decision making on Monday. But it is for our community that we will support. I support this recommendation today, as others have said. So thank you everyone for your hard work in bringing this paper to us today, and I totally endorse the recommendations. There's one story that I need to share. When we were standing there underneath the tent at the farmers market asking the community, well actually they flocked up to us, we didn't need to ask, did we, Councillor Sholem, to say should we purchase this? And this lady told us a story, and this is the stories that we take to our next generations. And we said, would you like to fill out this form? Yes, thank you. And we stood in front of the most amazing tree there, and I'm not sure what the tree is, but the tree's well over 100 years old, and all the little children were climbing in all over the branches of this magnificent tree. There's also one in Cornwall Park. And she said, and she wasn't a young woman, was she, Wendy? And she said, that's where I had my first kiss. And that story, it was just beautiful. And we stood there and we all laughed and we said, really, was it good? And she was very, very, she wanted to share her memories, as we all have. And that was her special memory. So I just thought I'd share that. So we have a mover and a seconder. Everyone has spoken who wishes to. I'll put those recommendations as highlighted up on the screen. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the team that have come in this morning to listen to that agenda item. And now we have item number 7. And this is the, we've got Graham here today to help us, Mr. Hanson, with the Hamoana Sea Protection Board. Thank you, Graham. Welcome. How are you, Graham? Do you want anyone to make some introductory comments about this, Graham? Or you will take care of it?
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, councillors. I'll take the paper as read, but perhaps just a couple of comments relevant to the wider content of the paper and the challenges of this particular project. And sorry if the paper is a little cumbersome. It was written a while ago on the basis and expectation that we were going to get there, and certainly indications strongly through the latter part of last year and early part of this year was that was the expectation. And as with all good organisation, and the 16th of May deadline, which was a significant period for us around more formal commitment to the project, we ended up in a challenging space of 2 of the 18 not supporting the project. So there's been an absolute flurry of activity post 16th of May, and I'm staring at Mr. Allen here a little bit, that for every great idea or good idea to try and find a way through a project that wasn't complete, there were quite challenging reasons or risks and challenges that have been difficult to support the project as it's landed. Disappointing and frustrating, happy to talk through those as necessary. But that's been the reality of the project, and it took me back to December 2019, the commitment of this organisation to assist the H18 residents, and the mantra at the time was a complete and continuous wall and a unified approach, particularly into the formality of consenting processes and funding arrangements. So, yeah, challenging in the latter part of this project, and therefore the paper's written on the basis of, unfortunately, getting to where the D-Day of today and the need to strike rates on the 30th of June has become a barrier to us to formalise it. Behind that, there were a whole lot of structural challenges about we've had offers to contribute towards or offset some of the issues, but again, if you look at our rating approach, it has a lot of structure around it, and you have to attach it to properties, and people have to pay, and it's not as simple as sort of offsetting from others. So, as I say, things that appeared standing back as to be quite readily managed, and late in the piece WOW stepped up and said they could contribute in the public good space. So all helpful component parts of it, but they weren't the solution we needed inside less than a week. I just wanted to acknowledge particularly the Westlock organisation associated with this. They've been on this journey with us at not an insignificant cost, and a contribution of time and effort and visits to Hawke's Bay from Canterbury. And so there's a level of disappointment at this particular time, but they've been certainly a great support to both Council and the H18 representatives, and acknowledging Councillor Redstone and Councillor Corbyn for their continued efforts and support both in Corral and the H18, and the challenge that we've got in being a conduit to try and find the solutions. We haven't done that, and at the moment, I say the paper states that we haven't at this particular time got to a point where we can support it. But keen to talk about what, if any, continuing support may be able to be achieved. So happy to perhaps take questions.
Thank you, Mr Henson, and thank you for the enormous amount of work. I know that the community really appreciates it. I'll just ask Councillor Redstone or Corbyn if they wish to add anything before we take questions and comments.
Not before comments.
Sorry, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. My questions are actually maybe more around the wording of the recommendations and whether it is appropriate. I'm not sure who, once again, who to ask this. That council does not support the process in the 22-23 financial year, and then add the reason, as in, as there is not currently support from all 18 property owners. I mean, if that's the reason, then I think we should put it in the recommendation. And then recommendation B, continue to support H18 residents to contain full support of all 18 property owners. Just so we're really clearly articulating why we've said no and what the hurdle is if it was to become a yes.
Comfortable with that addition?
Yeah, certainly happy with that suggestion or recommendation to clarify. I think it's implied between the two statements of saying that our reason to keep going would be to get perhaps the other two on board and have full support, so by implication, but certainly happy to put the words that make it clear.
Your Worship, my logic with that is for public reports, often the minutes just capture recommendations. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I think it's very disappointing that some property owners haven't agreed. I've sort of been on the fringe of this project for way before I joined council, so probably, I don't know, 15 plus years, I guess. The question I've got is how do we get this thing to move forward? It just concerns me a little bit that the motion that we have before us really kills it for this year. But is that the case, or can it be resurrected if there is a change of mind or a change of circumstances by the 18 property owners that somehow sorts the finances out?
Hold on. So we'll answer that question. You've just asked that question. Yep. Thank you, Bruce. You just explained the process.
Through your worship. So the constraint we have is that we're using the Rating Act as the means by which to collect the funds to repay the debt for which we're incurring to work our way through this process. But we only have one chance at doing that a year. So we're doing that next week on the 30th of June. The next opportunity is this time next year, and I guess through another sort of annual plan process. So we have no ability to strike a rate sort of midway through the year should all 18 come on board. It'll have to be in 12 months' time.
Could I sort of supplement the question? Because this is not only protecting the 18 properties, it's also protecting council assets. And it just worries me is what risks are we taking? Is there a real risk, or are we absolutely confident we'll get through without losing some of our vital infrastructure? I mean, every time a house goes, the erosion sort of heads back further towards the road, and it's getting perilously close in places now.
Through your worship, yes, thank you, councillor. The risk still exists, and it's a little bit how long is a piece of string, and the interpretation of when things occur, and the cyclic event of major events. The protection works we have done already in place at the Cape View corner was at the most exposed section of this particular coast, and it was the northern half of the H18 that are most exposed at the moment on the basis a third to a half of the property already in the sea. So the southern section, as we head south, there is more protection and more time, but based on current interpretations of sea level rise and climate change and erosion, we are still exposed, and the exposure will sit there until either that occurs or a solution is found or committed to. And that's just the reality of the coast, that section of coast.
Thank you. Councillor Sears?
We all keep falling off and jumping back on. Kia ora, Mayor Sandra. I think that's kind of answered my question because our infrastructure, of course, is really significant in this. But the land that the wall would go on is privately owned. So actually, without the private agreement, there's no other mechanisms that we can use because it does actually sit in private ownership, correct? Yeah.
You're correct, councillor, and that's the challenge at the moment is to get there in a willing private ownership capacity versus options around Public Works Act or something that we would promote if it was a council-related project. So that's not our desire or intent at this stage.
Thank you.
Councillor Sholem?
Thank you, Your Worship. Oh, this is rather disappointing, actually. And I do want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this, and actually the community members that are very on board too, because actually even getting the number that are on board is an achievement in itself. And I really do want to acknowledge Councillor Redstone and Councillor Corbyn for their efforts in this. Just for my clarity, when it comes to the recommendations, are we essentially saying here, look, we couldn't win this time round for this rating period, and we're just going to keep looking at this on an annual basis? Is that essentially what we're saying?
Thank you, councillor, and I actually struggled to write the second bit because I was actually wondering what I was promoting as well, if I'm honest. And it was challenged a little bit around Mr Allen's commentary of saying, well, what's the reality of what's in front of us? If it's only an annual process versus the ability to perhaps go and negotiate and deal with the challenge of the two, which I think, at the moment, there's been a lot of correspondence with me over literally the last 3 or 4 days, and I have a sense that within that there's still a way forward. The challenge is the opportunity that Hastings brings, which is not insignificant around a rating scheme and attempting to provide affordability opportunities, but it comes with the limitations of saying that at the moment my understanding is we push on for a year versus saying, well, look, in a month or two we might optimistically come back here with the 16 versus 18 solved. But then what do we do if it's a bit about, well, then we sit and wait for 10 months, and I think everyone is challenged by saying, are we going to hold everyone together for that period of time? And I share that fear, and also who knows what happens in that time around legislative changes and other RMA reform and things that have relevance for this particular problem. So I think there's a fear on both sides about this is a golden opportunity, and it's not, unfortunately, it's not the numbers game. Someone said to me, 60 or 80 is 90%. Now that's a pass mark in any world. That's unfortunately not how this works. And so I think the reality and the starkness of it is shown in this. But somehow I was writing some words around saying exactly what's occurred, that the reality of it's hitting home quite harshly over recent days. And I wouldn't be surprised if we could negotiate the actual project into a position. But I don't know what Hastings' opportunity to do something within or outside of the bounds of the limitations of, for example, the establishment of a rating scheme. So an open question for me a little bit, sorry.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And a follow-up question, if I may, Your Worship? I guess for me as well, what I'm interested to understand is, given that a driver for some of this is actually council-owned assets and ratepayer assets that are at risk, albeit not immediately or imminently, I'm keen to understand, what is the trigger for council to look at this more seriously? At what point do we look at our assets and go, they're at imminent risk and we have to do something? What's that process?
Very challenging question, thank you, councillor. And look at a macro level, and I suppose in my past involvement in the coastal management strategy, there is a significant dose of reality at some point in the future about more substantial changes out there in terms of retreating from there and looking at a new location for assets and new location for roads. That's something that realistically is in front of us on some sort of time frame. I suppose the Cape View Corner has been the example of how we've got there by, I was going to say stealth, that's not the right word, but by necessity as things have occurred. And probably the simplest answer at the moment is that we will monitor and have the experiences we have, be it good or bad, based on events that are still to strike us. And perhaps what happens particularly in that northern half of this particular project, and particularly for those properties that at the moment are largely empty, and therefore the exposure of things occurring through those. So we have I wouldn't use the word luxury, but we have the opportunity to exist with the sort of the barrier of what H18 is at the moment, albeit it's a pretty haphazard barrier. And we will be under increasing pressure as a council, I suppose, relative to our assets, just as and when experiences occur, which is what Cape View Corner evolved out of. But you're right, and sorry, that then translates into the challenge from some 18 landowners about what is a fair and reasonable split between the public-private good. You know, the inevitable, if it's inevitable, we're going to have a much more challenging position. Is the 15% a fair and reasonable assessment? We think it is relevant to what it is at the moment, but as it deteriorates, that'll be an ongoing discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. Fu, did you want to add anything? No. Councillor Lawson?
Thank you. A very simple question for you to follow those more difficult questions. And it probably leads on from what Councillor Kerr said in terms of communication, etc., and making it very plain as to what the situation is. Do all of the residents, affected residents, they completely understand the situation where this is an annual process and they've missed that opportunity for another 12 months? Just want to make sure that they all understand that.
My obvious answer is yes, it should be, because that's been very evident as we worked our way through this as to what the reason the council was at the table. One, to provide support and guidance and technical help and bringing the right people to the project, first and foremost. And then secondly, we were always, I suppose our most significant opportunity or benefit was through a rating approach to try and broach the affordability challenge and spread the cost of this thing over a long enough time frame. So I think that's been, whether it's been understood absolutely by every one of the 18, it's probably a question of the H18 reps rather than me. I'd be disappointed if they didn't, on the basis that we've given as much information as often as we've needed to. And certainly since post-Christmas, my efforts have been, do you understand, and particularly around being clear about what the future opportunities or risks were for those properties as well. So there's, to be fair to the 18 residents, there's been layers of challenges and decisions and the need to be clear about things, not only that opportunity, but, you know, do you understand the cost? Do you understand the risk? Do you understand the challenges of being in or out? And yeah, I'm trying to be respectful of that, of the 16 and the 2 in actual fact.
Yes.
But I'm, from what I'm privy to, and certainly information of the last few days, it's clear they understand the challenges now. I think there's a bit of a missed opportunity around perhaps not so much the rating element of that, but the clarity of what the project was, and that, you know, this was I suppose my term, a reasonably substantial opportunity.
Yeah, okay, thank
So,
you.
question for you, Mr. Allen. We could leave this paper sitting on the table until next week. If there is any doubt that, you know, that the community fully understand until next week when we strike the rates. Yes?
We could. It's very difficult to write rates resolutions on the fly. They're extremely legally constrained, so they need to be absolutely precise in what they are. So technically yes, but
okay, thank you.
Sorry, Worship, just relative to that, I think it's relevant to the very recent offers of others to cover some of those costs and the expectation that we can do that sort of on a handshake and overnight. So I think, you know, I'm nervous about that being interpreted as being, you know, the money's here, but it sits in different places, and through the rating scheme we try and accommodate or manage that. That's a particular challenge for us at the moment, particularly around the land ownership and approval needs.
But the community could bring this back this next year, and there could be planning undertaken this year in the form of the planning that you're doing at the moment.
Absolutely, Your Worship.
Yes.
Certainly, you know, that's perhaps what I'm advocating. I was keen to see what the flavour of this meeting was, that, you know, if the current momentum and perhaps challenges and eye-opening that's occurring even in the last few days, you know, maybe that component part of it could be actually resolved and found a way forward.
Yes.
In weeks and months rather than the next 12 months. My
Yes.
fear of that is, say we get there in the next weeks rather than months, how do we hold it together through to a this same time next year and the challenges of that, that's probably the bigger question for myself.
I guess it's a formalised commitment from the community, isn't it? That, it's that they're in agreement to bring this back. Okay, Councillor Redstone?
Are we allowed to comment?
Any other questions?
Yep.
Councillor Barber, I'll come back to you, Councillor Redstone.
Do we know what the issues are? Why the two are opposing? I mean, it's not in the paper. Are we able to know that? I mean, affordability? Is it commercially sensitive or what?
Thank you, Councillor. And hence my comment at the start, it's been quite challenging to conclude this paper. There was a significant amount of detail in here that did actually disclose that information and the properties, and I didn't think it was Hastings District's role to manage or deal with that particular issue. The two properties have two different issues. One appears to be affordability, and the other one is a fundamental question mark around whether this is the right solution. But some of that relates to perhaps Councillor Lawson's query about are they fully understanding of what's on offer here, not so much around the rating scheme, but around the solution. And torn between, and if I look back through correspondence and information, there's always an element of saying, well, the detailed design phase deals with some of the stuff, and the consent phase draws a lot of that out, versus saying, they want confidence up front. And some of this challenge has been around, the $400,000 plus GST for a consent phase is eye-watering. And, we'd like some guarantees, but of course then to say, well, we step into those processes, eyes wide open, and it is what it is. And so, and I've tried to paint the positive picture, and if we are all in there, we're well-dressed, and we put out, absolute significant effort into that, could you achieve that cheaper? And that's actually what you should target, and to make the 400,000 a cheaper figure. But it's a sensitive area, it's a sensitive bit of coast, and, through a substantial public notification process, it could be a long-winded, challenging one. So, all those things are in play, and the guarantees are what people want, be it around guarantees of cost of construction, which is probably more manageable than saying some of these processes you're in or out, and when you're in, you're in.
Yeah. Okay. And just to follow up on that, then, putting it off a year ain't going to help with the costs. That's likely just to go up, I would think.
Oh, absolutely, Councillor. We're dealing with it on a day-by-day basis at the moment, rather than a 12-month, as we speak, in terms of projects that we have live at the moment. Westlock, I've stayed in touch with us over recent days associated with where we've landed, and they are certainly keen to still be at the table, and have suggested to me there's some other options around potential ownership, and some they retain an ownership and a leasing option that might have some attraction for those properties. So there's some more liberal and lateral thinking, but it's all happening very, very 11th hour, unfortunately.
Councillor Corbin, did you have a question? Ready to make a comment?
Mine's a comment.
Okay, cool. Councillor Dixon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. What options are available to the District Council if this carries on year after year after year? You can't get everyone across the line.
I'm struggling with a definitive answer, and we did talk in the early days, and from my past experience in terms of things like drainage schemes, where there are, we've had sometimes arbitrary thresholds, and it's a bit about you get, hence the comment about 89% are into this, isn't that good enough? The challenge with this is A, it's a very small number of people, and B, it's a big sum of money per property. So, it'd be a more comfortable position if it was a few $100s per property that you would impose it on a small number that didn't want to join. Our challenge, and Mr. Allen may want to comment further, but our challenge at the moment is imposing it on two for such a substantial sum of money in a period of time.
If they've dug their toes in now, there's nothing to convince them not to dig their toes in again further down the track. That's the problem.
Agree with that, Councillor, but there's peripheral issues that I think would help that particular circumstance. It's not just an affordability issue.
Thank you. Councillor Redstone?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Graham, for all the work you've put into this. It's been an incredible amount of time and energy, and really acknowledge your work in this. And I'd just like to say that the two people who have opted out, part of the reason they've opted out is because of information they received about, which put doubt into their minds about the possibility of rebuilding or renovating their homes. I think that's a discussion that needs to be had, particularly in light of the fact that if there was a good solid wall there, then where do we sit with that sort of opportunity? So that's the discussion that needs to happen with those people in particular, because I believe that both of them would probably come to the party if they thought there was a benefit in what they were going to spend. But what they're doubtful about is there a benefit, or in fact are they just pouring money into a big hole? So I agree totally with the recommendations, and I think we need to keep talking to these people. It's great to have 16 on board, and they're very keen to proceed and very, very disappointed, as you might imagine. So I'd like to move the recommendations if I can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Redstone. Seconder, Councillor Nixon.
Sorry, I was.
You want a second?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I was going to make a comment, and I'd like to second the
Yes,
recommendation.
certainly.
And my comment is, I was at that meeting on December 2009, and it was a very positive meeting. 2019, sorry. I haven't been here that long. 2019, and it was a very positive meeting because there were representatives of regional council, district council, and the landowners at the meeting. And there was great collaboration at the meeting, and it seemed like the stars were aligned to get a solution to a problem that's been there for a long, long time. So it is disappointing to get to where we've got to, but we have to acknowledge the work that Graham Hansen's done, a tremendous amount of work, but also tremendous patience over that time. So it is really disappointing to be where we are. I support the recommendation, and particularly trying to find a way forward with all 18 property owners.
Thank you, Elwyn. Just a question for you, Mr O'Shaughnessy. Have you been invited to part of the groups to understand the future opportunities or not for rebuild on site?
I've been involved in some meetings, but the primary resource consent responsibility falls with HBRC. But also we've offered on a number of occasions to sit down with people on their individual properties and work through what they can and can't do. And I think that's what Councillor Redstone was indicating, and we're more than happy to do that.
Excellent. So I think that there is, like Councillor Corbyn has just said, there was a great deal of willingness in that room when we had the meeting here in 2019 from all parties. And I don't think that, I think that we should be continuing on with that work, and I agree with you. And I agree with you too, Anne. All right, so we'll have a mover and a seconder. There's no further comments. I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. And thank you, Graham, for your amazing work. Let's hope we get there someday soon. Nothing should be lost. Item number 8. And this is the proposed amendment to meeting schedules.
Happy to move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Second, and Councillor Watkins.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. That concludes our agenda today, and thank you, everyone. It is Matariki, and enjoy the wonderful festivities. I hope that you can get out and be part of our first ever Matariki celebrations in Heretaunga. And this morning was an outstanding blessing and opening to Matariki, and so lovely to think that our community was out there, and I just said 60 or 70 people in Civic Square, so very, very exciting to be hosting, and I got a text from someone last night saying she is very proud to be in Heretaunga with all the amazing Matariki events that are happening and how special this is. So today is a bit about Matariki for us means reflection of the past, celebrating today and looking at what the future may hold. And as we work through with the AMP Society, let us hope that the decision on Monday is a positive for what the future may hold and the opportunities that lie in front of us through the massive opportunity for the Tomoana Showgrounds for our community. So on that note, I conclude and we declare the meeting closed and see you this afternoon at Strategy and Policy. Thank you. We have a break now for